Hey YouTube, Poopslag here, and this is TurboFat, an open source game I'm making in the Godot engine. You can find a link to the source code at the GitHub page in the description below. And this month I was focused on writing the story and adding a few features that made that story writing process easier for me. But while doing so, I did think of a few cool ideas that I just had to add, so I went ahead and added some of those as well. Let me show you what I did. So as far as writing the first chapter of my game, I originally had a very granular set of tasks like I need to draw all the locations in my game, I need to make all the characters, I need to write all the cutscenes, but those are hard to do in isolation. You can't really write cutscenes for characters that don't exist. You can't draw locations and then just weave them into a random story. So I had to do a storyboard first. I just kind of had to. And this was tough for me. I'm used to just sitting down for an hour a day and coding or drawing, but just sitting down for an hour and writing, that's tough. It's hard, but I did get through it. I came up with a storyboard, and it covers all the characters, all the places, and all the dialogue and little off jokes. And that gave me two important things, right? It gave me a list of all the people, places, and things that are going to be in the first chapter. So for example, I know one of the restaurants is going to have a bathroom for this one joke to work. One of them is going to have outdoor seating and things like that. When it comes time to say I need to design all the characters for my first chapter, I can say, yes, I am done, because this is the list of the 8 characters that need to be there, and they're all designed. So yes, I have a concrete list. So that was good. That was the first thing it gave me. The other was it gave me these development tasks. So I think this is an important point to highlight, because if you design your dialogue engine for your game, and then you write for that dialogue engine, you're only going to confine yourself to what the dialogue engine can handle. So you're going to have a problem where maybe your story could be cooler, but you're never going to write the cooler version of the story because you're confining yourself there. So I like the idea of just writing stuff regardless of what my story engine can handle right now, and then growing it if it needs to with these tasks. So I do have little tasks for things like if there's a plot point where someone cuts down some bushes, you need to support that. You need to say, oh, it's at this part of the story, these bushes don't exist, and I'll do that someday. So yeah, I like this approach, and we'll see how it goes. So I showcased my game to some people on the Godot subreddit, and one piece of feedback I got was they didn't like the food eating effect, because it used to be when you made lines, some food would float up, and then some lasers would just shoot into the creature's mouth out of nowhere, and they were like, what is it? Are the lasers the food? What's going on here? So now it's a little more obvious. Let me show you. So when you clear some lines, the food appears, and then it zooms in the mouth, and little crumbs come out. So a little nicer. The hardest part of all this, though, is getting the creature's mouth position, because this is not just a nested set of no 2Ds and sprites where you can say, this here, give me its global position, and it'll map it for you. The reason why that doesn't work is because this creature itself is a viewport. It's rendered as a viewport to get that outline effect, so that was a necessity. It's rendered as a viewport and a viewport texture inside this little circle window, which is another viewport with another viewport texture, rendered inside the game window, and then the food layer itself, the layer that draws the food, is another little object that it needs to be transformed to. So in total, it involves unmapping like 7 or 8 different little transformations. It's this little tiny method, which took me about 2 or 3 days to write. It was very embarrassing and very difficult, but there it is. It did get done. After that, everything else is easy. The crumbs, I drew a bunch of crumb shapes, so they'd be jaggedy and not very consistent. That was important to me. And then I made this crumb cluster scene, which has 3 particle systems. You might wonder, well, why can't you just use 1 particle system for the same thing with clusters? And the reason is, most of these cakes, like this one on the left, are just a single color, but some can be up to 3 colors if you're good at the game and if you make the complex cakes. So like this one is red and pink, and the one on the right is brown and white, and those will result in multiple colors of crumbs. When this cake gets eaten, you can see brown and white crumbs shot out both at once. So to have multiple colors of crumbs, I couldn't figure out how to do that with 1 particle system. I had to have 3, so yeah, that's what I came up with. So I added support for other languages a few months ago, but a few pieces weren't being translated. One was these custom controls, right? Things like escape opens the menu, left moves your piece left. These weren't being translated, and the reason why is this Godot 4140, which is support localization of scan code strings, meaning things like escape will be translated into Spanish. This isn't implemented, which means we had to do it ourselves, and what I came up with is a little script which loops through all of the scan codes for ASCII printable characters, so 0 through 256, just the ones longer than 1 character. There's no Spanish word for K. I guess K is Spanish. Bad example. But I loop over all the ASCII printable characters, all the non-ASCII printable characters, things like F1, and then I generate this fake Python file, which just lists them all, and then they can go into our templates file, and then they'll be translated just like everything else. So there it is. It works. It's a nice little workaround. So in anticipation of creating like hundreds of these cutscenes that I'd have to write, I wanted a format that was easier to write by hand than JSON, because JSON's pretty easy, but for this it was more verbose than it needed to be. So you can see on the right here, for example, a single line of code where Bones says Bork and smiles is 5 lines of JSON, all these curly braces and stuff. And here on the left, it is a single line. So it has B says Bork, and there's a little anime smiley face to the left. And you can see there's little sections for location and characters. They're all very brief, very terse, very easy to type by hand. So how does this stuff work? It uses this custom Chatscript parser, which is a state machine, which knows, for example, when it parses a line that has square braces and location, then it enters this location state, and then all the future lines it reads will correspond to the location of the cutscene until it hits a blank line, and then it will return to the default state. So yeah, that was my little state machine, and it also has a list of all the little anime faces that it supports for the moods in the game, and presumably this will grow. So if you know any good anime faces I'm missing, let me know. So I upgraded the game to Godot 3.3, which uses something called sprite batching to make sprite rendering faster, and it just, makes the game like 20% faster and improves the frame rate. So the only downside is it did add one bug where, for one person specifically, it makes the pieces in the game render wrong. So I might have to make it toggleable in the options. We'll see. So I wanted all of the employees in this chapter to be a little bit difficult to work with, and this poor cat cannot rotate the current piece. He's a little bit new, but he can rotate the next piece. You can see this T piece will rotate however I want it, so there, I can plan ahead and make it sort of work. The more interesting thing, though, is not how this level works, but how the framework works. Let me show you that. I don't have a specific flag for saying the player can only rotate the next piece. I don't have that flag set or anything, but instead I have a set of triggers and effects. And for example, there's a trigger which says when the player rotates right, something happens. And what happens? It says the next piece rotates. And then I have an additional flag saying don't let them rotate the current piece, suppress piece rotation. So those 3 primitives combine to make this crazy and annoying level, but those same primitives can make a different level. For example, this level does not have that suppress rotate flag, so they can rotate the current piece. But every time they rotate a piece, it rotates all the pieces in the next queue the same direction. So if they're used to the pieces showing up in a certain order, now they have to really slow down and not be used to that. So yeah, I'm looking forward to combining these primitives in different ways and adding new ones. So there could obviously be phases for things like this one activates every 5 seconds, or activates when they clear a line, or activates every time there's an O piece or something. So I'm looking forward to making a bunch of different levels and coming up with these different primitives and hopefully giving the community pieces they need to make levels I didn't think of. I also added a bunch of new creature parts, so if you want to have these little rabbit ears, or this little turtle beak, or these cute little bean eyes, I think they're very adorable. I'll keep adding more though. So the overworld is much bigger than it used to be. A user from the Godot subreddit, CleonC, gave me the solution to that tile map seaming issue I was having, where a goop texture, when it crossed a chunk in the tile map, it would reset. So yeah, he had a fix for that, which worked great. The world does currently have about 10 creatures in it, and I'm a little worried that the off-screen creatures are receiving updates and maybe impacting performance, so I might try to measure that. And if it's noticeable, then I'll try to disable processing for them, and we'll see if that helps. So even though Godot says the game runs at 60 frames a second all the time, I noticed like every once in a while it looked like it was getting stuttery, especially when new monsters came out. So I wanted to measure that. I added this little frame drops, step drops thing you see in the corner there in the bottom right. So you can turn that on now with a cheat code, and it'll say every time a physics process or process is called and the previous call was more than a 60th of a second ago, according to the system clock, that number will go up, and it'll say like, wait a minute, like there was that, yeah. So 4 frames got dropped there apparently, like it was rendering and it got choppy because like, whoa, too many particles. Doesn't happen that often though. Usually the particles are fine. It's the monsters that make it slow down. So yeah, I'll do what I can to see if I can reduce the number of frame drops now that I can measure those. So that's where we're at after April. We got the game storyboarded. We got some new Chatscript tools, so it'll be not such a hassle having to write all that dialogue and stuff. Next month, we got a lot of writing to do, a lot of drawing to do. I know it'll be a lot. I'm not going to finish it, but we'll see how far I can get. Hope to see you guys next month. Thanks for watching.